Welcome to the Legal Influence Podcast, a show for influencers and content creators looking to land better brand deals and grow thriving businesses legally. I'm your host, Kate Cooper, and in today's episode, I'm going to talk about a very hot topic in the travel creator community, and that is hotel collaborations. Specifically, whether some of these quote unquote collaboration opportunities are effectively scams for creators and what to consider when it comes to deciding whether a hotel collaboration is worth it or not. Before I dive into today's episode, I do have to provide some disclaimers. Nothing that I share today is legal advice. Everything I share is my personal opinion and for informational purposes only. While I'm an attorney, listening to this episode doesn't create an attorney-client relationship between you and I. And I'm really approaching today's conversation from the lens of a content creator and not as an attorney. Ultimately, as a creator yourself, you are free to take on any brand partnership or hotel partnership that you want, and you need to determine for yourself what types of terms you're willing to agree to in exchange for a gifted or hosted hotel stay. But I am a firm believer that brand partnerships should always be mutually beneficial. So this is a topic that I really want to dive into. So I'm going to start off the episode by discussing a very specific situation that seems to be becoming more common when it comes to how hotels are approaching brand collaborations with influencers and content creators. So for some context, I'm a content creator in the outdoor and adventure travel space. My account is called Kate Outdoors, and so I get offers to collaborate with hotels from time to time. I also occasionally pitch hotels to work together, but that's something I'll discuss a little bit later. But right now, I want to talk about an outreach strategy that is becoming more prevalent in the hotel space. And essentially, hotels are making offers to creators to not only work for free, but to pay to work for the hotel. And that might sound ridiculous, but this is happening. And I've seen a huge uptick in these types of offers over the past year or so. And I know that a lot of other travel creators are having similar experiences. So I really want to talk about it. And before I do want to acknowledge that this type of situation that I'm going to talk about isn't going to apply to every hotel collaboration or offer to collaborate with a hotel. It's completely possible to work with hotels on a paid basis in a variety of capacities where there's a mutual exchange of value. But this is a very particular outreach strategy that I think is really important for creators to be able to identify. So let me rewind and set the stage a little bit here. So keep in mind, every negotiation and collaboration is going to look a little bit different. So I'm going to share the chain of events that I've seen typically transpire. So in this situation, the creator is contacted by a representative from a PR company to collaborate with a hotel. The PR rep reaches out via email and they say something like, "We'd love to host you at this hotel." They may provide a time frame for the stay. They may mention that the stay would be in exchange for a social media post, and then they ask if you're interested. Sometimes they also dive right in and ask what your availability is. So depending on how much information is provided in an outreach email, this is how I approach this type of outreach. So if I'm interested, I'll respond by either expressing interest or asking clarifying questions like what the deliverables are and whether the hotel has a budget. And again, this kind of depends what was contained in that initial outreach email. And then from there, the PR rep typically responds in one of a few different ways. Sometimes I get ghosted immediately after inquiring about a budget. Sometimes the PR rep reaches back out and clarifies that it's a hosted stay. They may offer some additional amenities during the stay, like a dining credit or access to certain activities, but the response makes it clear that there's no monetary budget involved. And sometimes the PR rep just sends a contract over. And I find that typically happens if you express interest or provide some availability without asking clarifying questions first. I've also received contracts in initial outreach email. So again, you really never know how things might proceed. Now, Once the contract arrives, this is where you find the problem, because once you dive into the terms of the contract, and again, I'm talking about this very specific outreach strategy, you find the hotel isn't just looking for you to come out to create content to post on your social media like the PR rep told you. They're actually looking for you to provide them with photo and or video content, often with full usage rights in perpetuity, which means forever. And it kind of cracks me up because it's never a reasonable limited license that you would ordinarily negotiate during a paid brand deal. Like, they're just trying to get the whole kit and caboodle from the get-go. And this is a bait and switch tactic that this PR company and hotel have now engaged in, because the terms of the partnership are now completely different from what was communicated to you. And the exchange of value between the parties is no longer equitable. Now, there could be situations where a hosted stay in exchange for social media coverage is reasonable, and I'll discuss some of those situations in a bit. But when it comes to usage rights to content, particularly paid usage rights that allow the hotel to use the content in ads or even on billboards or in magazines in perpetuity, is something that a creator could reasonably charge tens of thousands of dollars for. It's a huge right that they're giving up. And the cost of acquiring those usage rights to photos or videos is the reason why you often see limited licensing terms during paid brand deals, like 6 months or 1 year of paid usage, versus seeing terms where there's full usage in perpetuity. That is just such a huge right for a creator to give away, that if that is what the brand is looking for, they should, or the hotel is looking for, they need to be prepared to pay substantially for that right. So it's extremely unreasonable to not only expect content with full usage in perpetuity without paying for that right, but it's genuinely deceptive to hide those terms in a contract without ever discussing them with the creator. Usage rights are always a material term of the contract when you're working with a brand or a hotel. And ideally, you as the creator are going to bring them up during the negotiation phase of the brand deal if the brand doesn't. But in this hotel example, the PR rep never discloses that they're looking for usage rights to the content, so it may not naturally come up, even in situations where you specifically ask about deliverables. So I've seen this bait and switch tactic happen quite a few times, and at this point, I typically just don't respond. But when I have in the past, I'm either ghosted or the PR rep tries to make it seem like the additional content and usage isn't a big deal. And either way, it's extremely unprofessional. And I'm not sure who is teaching PR companies to use this strategy to get content for their hotel clients. But your business is not ethical if you have a regular practice of trying to exploit creators' intellectual property. In fact, I think that's really gross. I can assure you that the PR company in this situation isn't working for free. They're being paid by the brand. So it's just a little bit absurd that they would ask creators to also do work, but for free. But here's where it gets even worse. And this is why I'm specifically talking about hotel collaborations that do this and not product collaborations, because if you read between the lines here, creators aren't just being asked to work for free, but they actually have to pay to do the work. Because chances are you are going to have to travel to that hotel. Now, it could be a hotel that's an hour away. It could be a hotel that you have to fly to get to. But either way, you're responsible for the travel cost of getting there. And then the hotel is also asking you to take multiple days out of your schedule in order to travel and stay there for the purpose of creating content for the hotel. And the time that you're expected to do work for the hotel for free is time away from potential paid work that you could be doing. You also aren't going to be able to enjoy your time in the destination, even if it's a place that you want to visit, because you're going to be working. The typical offer in this situation involves a 2-night hotel stay. Maybe you get lucky with 3. But when you have to create content, that means you only have 1 full day to create that content. And I completely understand capturing footage for a reel or stories really doesn't take that much time, but if you're responsible for photos, that could take an additional amount of time. You may need to get specific shots that the brand or hotel is looking for. And then you also need to factor in the time that it takes to edit that content. But basically, if you're traveling for work, you're probably not going to have the same experience at the hotel and destination as if you were traveling purely for leisure and paying to stay at the hotel yourself. You also have to keep in mind that this type of in-kind collaboration, where you're essentially being paid for work with a free hotel stay, is likely still going to be considered taxable income. So you will be responsible for paying taxes on the fair market value of your stay. And depending on the value, you may even receive a 1099 from the hotel. So those taxes are an additional out-of-pocket expense that you are taking on as a creator, again, in order to do work for the hotel. And if you have specific questions about taxes and what you might need to report, I would highly encourage you to talk to a CPA. I'm not a tax professional, and everyone's situation is going to be unique. Now, with all of that said, I do think that there can be situations where a hosted hotel collaboration could be appropriate. For example, if we're talking about a luxury hotel that's, $1,500 a night offering a week-long stay with a dining credit and a spa credit and activities, that might be a situation where the value of that hosted stay is worth the deliverables being requested, even if it does include some content deliverables, even after factoring in the taxes. But in general, I'm a pretty firm believer that if a business, whether it's a hotel or a product-based company, expects usage rights to content, particularly paid usage rights, they need to pay for them. Personally, I think there could be situations where limited organic social usage rights, where a brand can repost content on their social media accounts, might be okay to give in an in-kind situation, especially if the content is already being created. But whether you want to provide organic social rights with or without financial compensation is going to be up to you to decide as a creator. But if we're talking about paid usage rights, especially paid usage rights in perpetuity, like you often see with these hotel schemes, this is a valuable asset that needs to be paid for. So now I'm going to shift gears a little bit and talk about a different scenario. And this is when a creator reaches out and pitches a hotel for a collaboration. And I want to acknowledge that every creator is going to have a different approach when it comes to taking on a collaboration like this. But I'm going to talk about my approach as someone in the outdoor niche. So I typically don't stay at many hotels when I travel because I camp. But on longer trips, I do enjoy staying somewhere with access to a shower. So occasionally I will pitch a hotel to collaborate. And I specifically look for hotels that cater towards outdoorsy people because that's who my audience is. And I always want to make sure that if I'm promoting a business, it's one that my audience is going to benefit from knowing about. So if I'm already traveling to a location and I need accommodations while I'm there, and there's an outdoorsy hotel or resort that I'm particularly interested in staying in, I will pitch them to potentially work together. Now, I have found that in this situation where a creator is pitching a hotel, typically the expected arrangement is a hosted stay in exchange for some type of social media coverage. Typically, it's a reel and some stories, but those deliverables might vary depending on the hotel and the type of content that you create. Now, the way that I look at this type of arrangement in order to determine whether or not it's worth it for me is to ask myself whether I would feature this hotel organically if I paid out of pocket to stay there. As I mentioned, I'm an outdoor creator, so I like to feature outdoorsy glamping resorts and hotels targeted towards outdoorsy folks when I stay there. So if I would share about a hotel organically, I'm open to taking on a hosted stay collaboration where I'm responsible for specific social media posts. Now, of course, a hosted collaboration with a hotel still requires an FTC disclosure, but that's going to be a conversation for another day. But what it really boils down to for me is that creating the content isn't really that big of an ask. And in this situation, I need, or at least want to stay at the hotel. So there's a fair exchange of value. And I should note, typically the value of 2 nights at the types of hotels that I'm typically pitching is going to be less than what my standard influencer rate would be for those social media deliverables. So I feel like the hotel is also getting a good deal in the partnership, because I do recognize there are additional considerations and expenses at play for a hotel providing an overnight stay versus a creator working with a brand sending product. Now, where I personally draw the line when it comes to working with hotels that I've pitched myself is providing content deliverables for the hotel's use. So if after pitching a hotel, they let me know that they are looking for photos or videos for their own use, then I let them know that's something that I charge extra for, because as I discussed, those usage rights are valuable. And then I see how things shake out from there. Now, when it comes to pitching yourself for paid collaborations with a hotel, whether it's in exchange for coverage on social media or for content deliverables, I find that you're going to have more success if you already have an established relationship with a hotel or a PR contact, or there's something unique that you can offer to the hotel. For example, if you're a drone photographer and you see a beach resort that could really benefit from some drone shots of the property on their website, that's a unique angle that you could take when you pitch the resort to work together. Also, keep in mind, a hosted collaboration could potentially open the door for a paid collaboration down the line. So don't be afraid to reach back out to hotels that you've worked with in the past and pitch them for future opportunities. Ultimately, there's a lot to consider and decide for yourself when it comes to working with hotels, but I do think it's important to discern when there's an opportunity to reach an agreement that's mutually beneficial versus when a hotel is looking to take advantage of creators. I also want to quickly touch on the idea of getting free hotel stays or becoming a travel creator who works specifically with hotels, and how that can be really glamorized on social media. And I think that's one of the reasons why hotels are being so brazen in their approach to working with creators and acquiring usage rights to content. Because I think a lot of the messaging that's out there, particularly in the travel niche, encourages newer creators to accept these offers that are ultimately really bad deals with bad terms, where the creator is working for free and giving away their intellectual property rights. And I definitely don't fault those new creators who don't necessarily have a lot of experience negotiating or working with brands or hotels. Again, I understand the idea of a free hotel stay can be very attractive, but I think it's really important to consider the amount of work that may be involved in creating the deliverables that you're responsible for, and the value you're providing the brand if content deliverables with usage rights are involved. And there seems to be a race to the bottom when it comes to landing brand deals, and it really doesn't have to be that way. You deserve to be paid for your creative work, and the more that creators say no to bad brand deals, the more solidarity there will be across the industry. So thank you so much for listening to the Legal Influence podcast today. If you enjoyed today's episode, please make sure to subscribe and leave a rating and review. And if you know any influencers or content creators who would benefit from this episode, please send it on to them. Talk to you soon.